Hello, you're watching Damage Reports, where two middle-aged geeks watch Star Trek in the 21st century and give you our reviews. And this week we watch Star Trek Lower Decks. Is this episode 9?
At 9 of 10.
9 of 10.
Just like the Voyager actress. Imagine I should do that. I should be the most stupid. After the conversation we just had off air, I should make like the most stupid references that don't make sense. People are like, fuck these guys.
And this episode of Lower Decks was really a return to the Jedi. You know, just say stuff like that. So.
Oink, oink. That's James. I'm Mike. We are watching, we've decided to start watching all of the CBS All Access era Star Treks. We've given our opinion so far on Picard as a whole. We're about to finish the first season of Star Trek Lower Decks, and we're about to zoom into Star Trek Discovery at light speed. All right, I'm done. In a couple of weeks. But James, what did you think of the episode Crisis Point?
This is going to be an odd one for me. So the first 10 minutes, I was writing a letter on my vintage typewriter. Dear CBS All Access, how you can go fuck yourself. Let me write the ways. Like the first, I think, 10 minutes of this episode, I was like, you guys don't know anything about Star Trek. You don't know anything about this universe. You don't know anything about how to write a character. You don't know anything. And then the last 10 minutes, I was like, all right, this is probably the second best episode of the show so far. So
I'm interested to see what you think or where the turnaround happened, because
literally
I kind of had a similar.
Me taking and eating my own words out of that fake typewriter. So those who love this show and are 10 fans who and one or two that like this show and think I'm too harsh, I literally 10. Was 10. Yeah, if we're lucky. I literally went from hating this episode to going like, okay, this is a smart episode, although it's very unbalanced.
Yep. Let's hop into it then. Crisis Point. On the USS Cerritos, Ensign
spoiler
Boimler
alert.
Creates... Ensign Boimler creates a holodeck program using the crew's private logs to get an accurate representation to prepare for his interview with Captain Freeman on a promotion. After Freeman sends Mariner to therapy, she decides to make a movie on how much she resents her using Boimler's program in the holodeck. So what happens is Boimler's there trying to glean information using all the personal logs, kind of pulling a Lieutenant Barclay, if you will. And then Mariner, as always, decides to be a major dick about it and takes it over and reprograms his program into a movie that casts her, Tendi, and Rutherford as the villains and who are trying to destroy the ship. And I'm sure we're going to go into what exactly happens as we talk, so I'm not going to give you a full synopsis.
So that's a good rundown. I think that's all you really need to know going into that's more than what you need to know going into this episode. All right. Thoughts overall, Mike, on the episode.
It's probably second favorite episode, just like you said.
Same.
It started out, and I don't remember how it tracked. I mean, it's one of those things where it's like I don't totally dislike the show, even at its worst. I enjoy it, but it was one of those things where it's like, okay, it's funny that the lizard people are like, well, we just get eaten. It's our lot in life. I liked that, but it didn't turn the corner for me. First, it turned the corner where I was like, oh man, Paul F. Tompkins, and I really enjoyed hearing his voice as the ship's bird therapist.
Yeah,
but man, once the holodeck kicked in and it became the opening credits to Star Trek II with the homage to the James Horner music, I was like, all right, I'm getting into this. And then where it went by parodying not only the Shatner era movies, but then the Bad Robot movies with all the lens flare and stuff. It was like, okay, these guys know at least what they're parodying.
Yeah.
And the idea of making the parody not be making fun of them, but like making fun of it, but in a loving manner, it very much Galaxy Quested the Star Trek movies.
Yeah.
But also allowed it to have those classic Star Trek tropes of the fighting yourself fighting the worst parts of yourself and overcoming the worst parts of yourself.
Yeah.
But I like the twist where the worst parts of Mariner Self were the noble parts.
Yeah.
And that the evil one was our character.
Was our character.
That's our Homer.
That's yeah. That's
and I think the only thing I regret is that I called one of the jokes way early, and I was like telling myself, if this isn't what the joke is, it's a betrayal of this character. And when it pulled off what that joke was, I
guess it? Because there's an obvious joke build up that, and if you've been watching the shows, it easy pays off. Is Rutherford gets a gun and he's gonna go tell his boss what he thinks of him. He gets right in there, busts right in. He's like, I just gotta tell you, I think the way you work the warp core is amazing. And
You're the best.
You're the best. And I was just like, oh, Rutherford. I could Rutherford. It's so weird to like a character that is so basic and silly and stupid. But I think a lot of us relate to that. Like if we were so many geeks take Star Trek so seriously of like what life could be. I remember when we were in America, when we were doing the housing crisis bailout, we gave them like $700 billion, something like that. And a bunch of scientists got together and were like, with that money, you could actually make an enterprise. And so they started work. You can find it online still. They worked out the schematics of cost and what you would need to do to build an actual Starship Enterprise on Earth and get it in orbit. And
Just the framing. I mean, I doubt they came up with the dilithium chambers.
Well, no, they came up with the reason why the saucer section needs to be round is because you're going to have a giant magnet that's going to be spinning at the bottom of it that will give gravity. There was a lot of crazy thought put into this.
I'm already like tuning out on that, where I'm like, fucking nerds.
But
like,
the idea that there is a population of us that take this that seriously.
Yeah.
And seeing Rutherford is that character that like, I'm happy to be here. It's there's nothing wrong with having a silly positive character if it works. And
I think what I've come to notice him as is that he's the anti Dwight Schrute, where he is just relentlessly positive about work.
Yeah.
And is always gonna see the good and fun in work and his coworkers, and I like that. It's the same reason I like Ted Lasso so much, because it's like I've said before, Ted Lasso on Apple TV Plus, Jason Sudeikis, he's sort of like an effective Michael Scott. Whereas instead of it being like he's trying his best and he stumbles, he's trying his best and he's succeeding, and people enjoy the fact that it's like, look at this guy and his positivity. So I'm really happy that, especially with what's going on in the world right now, to have these two very positive characters. And I like I said, I called the joke, but I was so happy that was the joke.
Yeah.
It made me laugh.
Same. For me, the episode did not turn until much later in the episode. I did like moments. So the opening, hated it, and we'll go into this more. And even when they got onto the ship, I did not like it, into the movie of the holodeck. I actually said to myself, the Star Trek 1, Star Trek 2 going to the Enterprise montage, I laughed and I was like, well, the best part of your fucking thing is a montage joke of other montage jokes.
But the montage joke to the point where Shear's engineer was crying, it was like, okay, that took it to the level that I wanted it to go.
But again, we've said, be a comedy show or a Star Trek show, or even better, be a comedy Star Trek show. And at least that was making a joke on, because if you go back and watch Star Trek 1 and 2, 1 especially, 2, they reuse
1
shots.
is long.
Oh my God.
2 is, I was going to talk about that. 2 is completely all of those shots in Space Docker from the first one.
Yeah.
But we talked about this before, and I think I'd mentioned it to you about how amazing it is to live in a world where there's a CBS All Access, where we get these consistent weeks of new Star Trek. Like this year, we'll have had 3 Star Trek shows in a year.
Yeah.
We've had Picard, we've had Lower Decks, and we've had a new series of Discovery. And when you look back to Star Trek 2, having to reuse all the effects from one. The Klingon warships that they see in the Kobayashi Maru test being the same ones from the first one.
Yeah.
The space dock material, they basically had a TV budget to do it.
Yeah.
And now to being where like the cornerstone of this channel is Star Trek. I'm so happy that it survived past all that. But it's one of those things that I was going to mention again later, and I will, about how it has an unlimited budget. But going from like having to reuse effects like that to having the budget they have, the imagination they have with like the budgetless, quote unquote budgetlessness of animation, I'm really happy about. But yeah, it's wild thinking that Star Trek is as prominent as it is now when it almost was destroyed because of how bad that first movie turned out to some people.
I'd actually say that's the great thing about Star Trek. It has been destroyed a couple of times. Like, and after season 3, you were dead. Like, they weren't coming back, and again, we mentioned this a couple of times. Rod Serling had a famous quote that when they canceled Star Trek, he wanted to beat up the TV executives that made that decision because he thought it was the wrong choice. And then they weren't going to make a movie of it until Star Wars had become such a big hit. And then they're like, we own this one, do something with it. And that was also off because they had done a Star Trek convention in New York. And Leonard Nimoy has a great speech about it where he was like, there'll be a couple 100 people there that are really big fans. We'll show up, take some pictures, sign a couple autographs, maybe make a couple of bucks, everybody. Let's go. And they went there, and it was in this modest convention center in like the late 70s. And they sold it out, and there were people in piles and for, the whole entire block outside, like it was a big Broadway show or the, Rolling Stones were there or something. And he was like, something's up. He was very much like, I did not know, one, we had this many fans, and two, that they were this passionate. That like, there's like 100 people out there dressed like my character I played for 3 years. I think I was on.
Someone was dressed up as his Mission Impossible character.
I was about to say. I'm just gonna say that. It's just gonna say I did Mission Impossible. I think longer. If I had a Mission Impossible convention, no one showing up dressed like me. So it's stuff like that.
We've talked about it. And I just showed Stephanie. God, what were we watching? She had come over. Stephanie, my girlfriend, had come over, and generally she makes fun of me because when she comes over during quarantine, I'm either watching Star Trek Deep Space Nine or watching a movie, and more times than not it's Deep Space Nine. And someone said something about how the transporter works, and she goes, what would happen if it didn't work? She goes, they should do something where like the transporter doesn't work. And I went, oh, and I put on the Star Trek the Motion Picture to show her that part where they melt. And long story short on that is how messed up it was for that dude that got melted, because he was going to play the Spock replacement on the new Star Trek TV show. But then when they were like, we're going to use these sets and costumes and everything to make a movie, Nimoy was like, then I want a part of that. And they're like, but we have this guy under contract. So they were like, let's put him in and then we'll melt him. And it's like, oh, cool.
I did not know that story.
Yeah, a lot of I wouldn't say a lot, but a number of Star Trek Next Generation first and second seasons I think were originally thought of to be that Star Trek Phase 2 episodes, and they just changed character names and stuff on them. But I remember that. Maybe I have the details wrong, that it wasn't him playing the same character, but that was the actor. Okay. But imagine like still having the goodwill to be like, yeah, I guess I'll show up and fucking melt.
Let you murder me in front of everybody.
That scene is so frightening. Like
I saw it when I was like 8. My mom was a Trekkie, so she was like, "Oh, let's." We're at the video store. You've never seen Star Trek? Let's watch Star Trek. And I was like, "It's like Star Wars." Because I was like, I was 80-pound, 60-pound head and 20-pound body. I was like, "Yay!" And we put it on, and as soon as I was like, "Oh, beam me up, Scotty! I've heard that on my cartoons." And then they melt a guy. I was like, like instantly traumatized. Like I think that set me back for a couple of years on Star Trek.
And I love the Kirk like calling back to Starfleet, and he's like, "Starfleet, do you have them?" And the guy goes, "Enterprise. What we got back didn't live long." And it's like, God damn.
Yeah.
Like imagine like you just like
Yeah.
like oh my god, that has to be the most horrifying death in Star Trek to me.
Yeah.
I'm existentially, it's horrifying, like the idea that Captain Terrell like turns his phaser and just vaporizes himself in Star Trek 2.
Yeah.
The idea, two things are so humiliating to me in death: the idea of just getting decapitated, and the idea that it's just like instantly your body loses life and you're just meat. You're just a hunk of meat because like, and being vaporized, where it's like, god damn, there's not even anything to bury. Like I don't exist anymore. And it's like, welp, unless someone saw me, like no one's gonna know I'm dead. They're just gonna imagine what happened to me. Like that's horrifying to me. Third place would be so it's decapitation,
So everybody keeping track. Yeah, the
phaser on kill,
okay,
and then transporter accident.
So yeah, before we get into the good stuff and bad stuff, yeah. So this episode for me it took me a long time to win me over. I think I rewatched it a second time just to make sure my thoughts were clear. 7 minutes till we get to the movie, which is not really a movie. It's more of a video game or just a simulation. It's odd that they would call it that.
You don't know that. You don't know what movies are in the 24th century.
Oh, that's a good point. All right. So, touche. I mean, they still have the theater way, as we see in Next Generation constantly, but maybe movies are completely different.
You never know.
Never know. And that didn't win me over. There was so much that just did not win me over. And then when we started to see like, oh, this is what this episode's about. And it's a cliche that's been done a bunch of times. It's been done in science fiction a bunch of times. But it was kind of needed for this show. So then I was kind of like, all right, I really, there was enough that I liked just on its own, but then also the overall sort of arc of this episode really, I thought was, believe it or not, what the show needs badly. So I think it might have long-term importance.
I hope so, because I'm glad that the trailer for next week's, like, before we get into everything, the trailer from next week's looks like it's going to carry over a major plot point, and hopefully this sticks. Like the realization in this episode sticks, because if it goes back to a 0 point, I'm not going to be too happy.
Me neither. And the trailer for next week had exocomps in it.
What the hell? Like that blew my mind.
And I was instantly like, well, somebody's getting 5 stars. Like as soon as I have such a strong idiot connection to the exocomps. It's really dope. I love that Data was going to sacrifice himself to save these ugly, stupid looking, dumb prop
Not just
robots.
himself, but like the ship. He was just like, sorry. And these fucking little batteries not included ships are more important.
And the fact that he would bring up, like, at the time there wasn't streaming and everything, so the fact that he would bring up something from season 3,
Measure of Man was 2, I think.
And exocomps are like 5 or 6, I forget
6.
And so for him,
pretty sure 6.
So he busts out fucking season 2 information, like, well, you know, Picard, you once defended me, and they thought about turning me in. I owe these creatures the same freedoms you gave me. And it was like, holy shit. Like, I thought that was, as a teenager watching that they would reference something back. Again, no streaming, not out on VHS or DVD, really. I think they had VHS tapes, but you would have to wait for the summer to rewatch.
So expensive to get those VHS.
Yeah.
They had like 2 episodes per tape.
Yeah.
Oof.
And so, to make a reference back to something that happened 4 years before that, I just was like, oh my God. So I've always had this crazy love in my heart for the exocomps, even though they are the dumbest design. They look like a prop that somebody started building and gave up. And then somebody was like, put tracks on it, and that's what it is. We're out of money.
They look like the Matrix of Leadership from Transformers. Like
Yeah.
they look like, instead of it just being flat, like it has like a nose instead. Yeah. I did dig that from the promo on this, that it looked like it had a painted on science uniform. Like it had like the painted on blue. I was that's funny.
They, if it's 20 years after Next Generation, hopefully they've achieved some sort of ranking system for the Exocops.
That's nutty. And it talked. So, okay. We're going too far in the future.
All right.
So, James, what did you, or actually, we do me first, so then we loop around. So, I will say what I liked about this episode. Okay. I thought it was fun. I thought it was faithful to what they've presented so far on Lower Decks. I thought, like I said, it was a good parody of the Star Trek movies without being mean about it. Like, it was obviously the lens flare criticisms of the first two Bad Robot movies. I so dug the James Horner music impression. I forget what it's called, pastiche, whatever. Mm-hmm. But the opening credits, the music all together was really great. I thought the jokes landed. I was sad, like I said. I was happy to hear Paul F. Tompkins show up, but then he really didn't do anything, and his character didn't really do anything. I like that there's a counselor on the ship, that he might come back for some other stuff. The fact that it's like another species you couldn't get in live action, where he was like a bird person, and I dug that. I think it was, the thing I liked most about it is that it was a smart way of melding all of these ideas. It was Mariner going after her worst instincts, and I liked the realization of what the movie Mariner was doing, and the way that played out. I liked even the parody of like every Star Trek movie, Next Generation movie at least, ending up being where someone is like above a precarious chasm and fighting where they're gonna fall and die. That was in every one of the Next Generation. Now I wouldn't say it was in First Contact, but it was part of Insurrection, it was part of Nemesis, and even in the Bad Robot movies, where for some reason the Enterprise has to go sideways and someone's going to fall. I thought that was neat, even if they weren't trying to do that. The idea of it's a movie, so the ship has to explode. It was a neat distillation of all that stuff. But I liked how, for once, it wasn't Mariner's decisions affecting just Boimler or just affecting her mom. I liked that Rutherford and Tendi called her out on her crap. As funny as it was with the what I consider smart writing of when she blows up, is it Shax, whatever the security officer is? Yeah. When his Bajoran earring flies at her, and she's like, put it on. She's like, no, isn't it like a religious artifact? And she's like, who cares? Put it on. She's like, there's still ear in it. Like, I thought that was like a neat call on that. And for Tendi to be like, you are not respecting me. Like, this is a side of you I haven't seen. And then to further that, where you get to see that it's not the Thomas and William Riker thing, where it's like Next Generation's take on the confronting yourself was William and Thomas Riker, and Thomas Riker, if you haven't seen that episode, there's a transporter malfunction, and basically Riker gets carbon copied, and then they come back like 8 years later, and he's like, I've been here on my own this whole time. And it's the paths not taken, and the resentment you have of what you see yourself becoming. They even did it with Tapestry, that episode where Picard dreams about what would have happened if he didn't fight the Nausicaan in the bar fight and get an artificial heart. And it turns out he just doesn't take chances and is on the Enterprise and is just a lieutenant. Was he even an ensign? No, he was a lieutenant, I think. Yeah. How insulting would it be if he was just an ensign? But he's a lieutenant, and him confronting that he needs his reckless side. Going back to the original series, the episodes where Kirk was split in two, and it was him facing his worst impulses and overcoming them. And then even you'd say Mirror Mirror, where it's like the mirror universe counterparts of your evil self. I thought that it was neat to see that this time it was our regular character who was the asshole. Yeah. And who was fighting against a noble version of herself. Yeah. And I thought it was neat that you could see that if this was an episode that what we've seen over these previous 8 episodes is that Mariner would step up in the way that she did in this, but the neat way that she stepped up, but she stepped up against herself, and it was the noble parts versus the shitty parts that are coming out, and her realizing that. I thought that was a really smart way of, I hope, putting a button on how horrible Mariner has acted in the past, and hopefully it builds upon that in the next season and in the next episode and the next season. But I really enjoyed that, along with, like I said, so many of the jokes. I can't wait to tell you what I think about you. You're great. And then them saving the ship. And then what I really enjoyed, again, I think it was another dig at the movies, where Rutherford's solution was, I made it so that the transporter beamed everybody off repeatedly the whole time. And the engineer goes, that can't happen. He goes, well, it can now. And he's like, good job.
No, he says teleporters can't do that. And Rutherford says, it can. It's a movie.
Okay, is that what he says?
And that was the hardest I laughed at the episode, is because, yep, in the movies, the teleporters can do any magic you want. So I think that was a sort of meta or a dig at, especially the new films where,
especially the new ones,
the teleporters can do whatever you need them to do, magic. And so, no,
the subtle one that I caught too was, the idea, it wasn't so much a movie thing. You could say that with First Contact, but the hologram of who were they with in the beginning? God, I can't remember who it was. The hologram that they were originally with when they went in the hologram. Was it Da Vinci?
Yeah, he was Italian.
Was it Da Vinci? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think so.
But the idea that there's this hologram character from the past, like to have that wacky character, and then the way that he came back in the epilogue, I thought that was really funny. Like, just to do the epilogue, riffing off Star Trek 2 again with the music and everything. It hit all the right buttons for me, and I could keep talking about what I enjoyed, but I'm going to just be saying I liked so much about it. The only, the further nerdy thing I will go into is that I really enjoyed the small detail where Tendy's covered in blood, and she calls for the Arch to leave the holodeck, and as soon as she walks out, she's still in the uniform, but the blood all disappears. Mm-hmm. And I like the smart way of using the holodeck like that, where it's so inconsistent on Next Generation about what the holodeck can and can't do. Like, is this all holographic? Is it matter that's coming through? Mm-hmm. Like, the first episode has Wesley coming out of the holodeck all covered in water. Yeah. But if the water was holographic, why is he wet? Because it's actual matter. But the idea that as soon as she walks out, the blood that's on her all disappears. I thought that was a really quick, neat touch that didn't need to be there. But I was like, okay, you guys made that. You guys noticed that. You did that. Hats off to you on that.
Yeah. If we're talking about stuff we liked first, then I would say I really did not like the first 7 minutes of this episode. I really didn't, and I'll go into further detail.
Let's combine them then, because like my dislikes are so little on there, but I'll be able to compliment you on yours when you start laying them out, because I have a couple things in there, mostly from the beginning.
All right, well, I can do my dislikes first. We'll just mess this episode all up.
Yeah.
The opening of having her go to a planet, and it's a planet that has 2 species on it. One's eating the other one, and the other one is fine with it because that's its existence. And she goes and teaches them not to eat each other, which is, breaking the Prime Directive, and goes against like everything Star Trek's kind of about with its space exploration, which is already kind of a problem. The second thing is, why would the Cerritos be involved in that sort of mission? Like, if we're that new of talking to an alien group, we've established that this is not what they do. They do second contact. Then that felt like, okay, so they shouldn't even be here. So Mariner's just being a problem, going against Starfleet. And it's like, where do we say that ends and begins? Because is she going to Earth telling cows to stand up for themselves and not be hurt? Cows.
Well, because she ends up saying like, fuck the Prime Directive, and it's like, okay, that's a little too far, where even though like every captain we've followed bends it a little, like to have that disregard is like, okay, no, that's a problem if that's what the character thinks.
And the idea of And I was just getting mad the first 10 minutes because it was like, man, these writers don't know the universe of Star Trek. But not just disregard the prime directive. There are other spaceships. There are other jobs. You don't need to be in Starfleet. Like, they seem to, there's this locked idea in this show that the only starships in the galaxy are Starfleet or its enemies. And that is not true.
Or that even all of the Starfleet ships have the same jobs.
Yeah.
Like, they make a distinction that this is just a second contact ship, but like there are ships that are just there are warships, but they don't do much because there's not really war ever.
Yep.
They're
Science
science
vessels that go around doing that. There are space stations if you don't like
freighters
doing this. There are scavengers. There's so many other things you can do if you don't want to be on Earth, because all it is winery and or going to winery. What did she say? And some sort of foods
and
soul
food.
Yeah,
because of the that was one of those ones where I was like, okay, that's good. Referencing Picard's winery and Ben Sisko's dad's restaurant. It was like, okay, that's one I can accept, because she didn't say the only things to do are Picard's winery or Sisko's restaurant. Like, fine line.
So and I felt that like, oh man, this character doesn't need to be here, and then it's like, you're going to therapy. Oh, don't make me go to the therapist. All he does is food analogies, and then that first joke bombed so bad for me. It's like, you have such a fruit salad. I was told to say it this way because I'm told to talk about food, and I was just like, my God, you guys cannot write a joke to save your fucking life. I was the first 7 minutes I was just like, this show's got one more episode, and then me and Mike in 10 years will look back at the time we reviewed that failed 1 season 10 episode that nobody watched or gave a shit about Star Trek show, and I'll use it as a grumpy old man like, you think you got it bad.
I wasted 10 weeks
10 weeks of my fucking life, Junior, in quarantine watching Lower Decks. So that's what I thought I was watching. Then when we go into the holodeck simulation, the movie, the first going on the ship, I thought that was a funny thing. I was like, man, this is a great montage, and they're making fun of Star Trek 1 and 2. To Star Trek 1 and 2's defense, Star Trek on the TV show had a ship this big. It had a Galaxy Quest ship this big. It had a wooden ship polished up, the big model, with like 8 lights in it, because that's all they could afford. So when they got a little bit of money and got some miniature designers and model makers that were very skilled, and matte painters that were very skilled, they wanted to show that shit off, and I get that. I totally get that. So it's Superman first flying in the first Superman film.
And let's review that sequence right now. It is long and laborious. I love it. I love the track on the soundtrack.
It's great. It's wouldn't change a thing. And that was the first thing. And I even thought to myself, okay, your montage is the best thing in your episode. Because I still wasn't sold on this being a good episode. To this point, I thought it was a horrible episode with a really great montage.
You just reminded me of a joke when the Admiral at that station tells him to go. Boimler says something and chimes in, and the Admiral goes, "Who's this boy?" And it made me laugh. Like, just the insults that they have for him, but like the innocent, "Whose boy is this?" Really made me laugh.
And then we get on to Mariner's ship. Mariner made this protocol so that she could be the villain. Then she cast her friends as her lower piece of shit sidekicks.
Henchmen.
Henchmen. Which I was like, wow, like this being a toxic character has no ends. And then they go on the ship, and all she is doing is murdering the other people on her ship. That's it. That's the whole episode. Is like, I did this so I can murder my fellow workers. Now, let's rewind. Let's say you work with somebody, your good friend that you work with, and you go into a simulation, and they made the place you work at. And they're like, okay, now let's go do a mass shooting in there and load up a gun and go in there and kill. I'd leave. I would be like, cool. You know what's hilarious? Entering a workplace and doing a mass shooting. I was just like, I was not sold on this concept. And I was like, I was like, this is really gross and just a shitty character, and I was just kind of done with it. And then the Rutherford side
But it
story.
wasn't. It didn't even end with like just shooting people. Like the thing that rubbed me wrong was her saying, "Let's go find these specific people and shoot them." And it's like, oh, okay, that's all right.
But you're still going down the hallway just killing anybody.
No, I'm not defending it. I was
Yeah.
like that's like even further where it's like I'm gonna go and do this. The joke that I interpreted, maybe it wasn't a joke, was that they were naming all these characters by name that we'd never seen before.
Yeah.
And then that one character that saves the captain from whoever's like trying to attack her at the end. I don't remember if it was Mariner or not. But I thought that was a funny joke about how these random crew members show up in the Next Generation movies and we've never seen them before. But it's like, oh, we're supposed to care who this guy is, like Hawk in First Contact. She's Trill, the Trill helmsman in Insurrection. It's so dumb. But when Riker does that, I think I'm gonna have to go through the briar patch like manually, and a little like joystick pops up, and it looks like it's just straight out of like a Babbage's or an EB. It like just pops up, and he goes to get it, and the Trill helmsman like gives him this look like sexy motherfucker.
Yeah.
And it was like, who are you? Why is there that shot of you? But yeah, I felt like that was a good clever joke of like, let's name all these characters we don't know.
Yeah.
And have them be a part of this. And if it wasn't, maybe I'm ascribing too much to it, which is how much I like this episode.
Yep.
But I interrupted again. I'm sorry.
That's all right. And so I was just like, now her friends are just enabling this horrible toxic behavior from a complete shithead. And I'm wondering why I'm watching this at all as I'm finishing my letter to them. And then one of the things that was set up was Boimir used everybody's personal logs, private logs, to create everybody's character on the ship to make sure that they all respond accurately. And he's doing this just so he can ace an interview and hopefully get a promotion or at least get good marks. And so everybody that shows up is kind of them because he's using their private logs, right?
To the point where I thought the twist of the episode was that the captain was going to come onto the holodeck and have an argument with Mariner, and Mariner thinking she was a hologram, but it being a real conversation between mother and daughter. Mm-hmm. And so when that didn't happen, I was really thankful for that.
Yeah. So I didn't like any of that. Like, I really didn't like any of that. I thought that was, I think there's many different ways to go about it. Our character needs to fight themselves or deal with themselves, or our character needs therapy. And what does therapy look like for different people? Some people just need to be left in a void to talk things out. Some people, need to go paintballing. Some people like to go fishing. Like, everybody's got their own form of therapy, and there is no right answer, so whatever is therapeutic for a person is therapeutic for a person. If your best friend or one of your friends, the therapeutic thing is for them to go on a mass shooting spree of everybody you know, then you probably should not hang out with that person.
Yeah.
So I didn't care for any of that. Then we got into what is, like, we've talked about it. So I think that's probably it. And then, lines every now and again here that I didn't like. Stuff I did like was then we get into what this episode is about, which is her actually going to therapy. She accidentally or on purpose, however you want to look at it, creates a therapy session for herself. She creates a movie on the holodeck and goes into it using Boromir's stuff that's already set up, and is forced to confront herself at the end. Classic sci-fi trope. Our hero or villain must confront themselves and battle them. And
this was right up your Star Trek 3 or Superman 3 alley.
Right. Something very dear to my heart is, we've seen it done to type. Good Kirk, Bad Kirk, Rick and Morty again. They do the detoxification. It's been done a million times in sci-fi tropes, and I like it. I'm a sucker for this story. I am going to battle the evil version of myself, which still probably the best one ever done. is sadly Scott Pilgrim versus the World, where the evil version of himself,
I love that ending,
is just them talking about French toast. And they decide, well, we'll meet up later, but we're going to go get some of that French toast. So the idea that even the evil part of you would still have some of the same likes as you, and can you find a common ground to just talk it out?
What does he say to? He's like, yeah, he's pretty cool. Like he's.
So, the idea of having to fight the evil version of yourself has been done in every video game you've ever loved. Half a dozen movies and science fiction strips. And the twist in this one is the evil version is our hero. And that's smart. That is interesting. That is something that is bold of saying, because you're looking at your character from a very harsh lens. One of the Rick and Morty separating of the good and bad, and they have the booger Rick and Morty, where Rick realizes we need both our good parts and bad parts to be the people we are, and how that's not fair to just try to flush it all away, is a really strong statement, because we all have flaws that we need to work with.
Yeah, even back to tying it to Star Trek V with the I need my pain. My pain makes me who I am thing. Yeah.
And so in this one, to have that happen was, and for Mariner not to be like, whatever, this is bullshit, time for me to play my guitar and ride my skateboard because I'm Poochie the dog, is like, we didn't have that. We had the character go like, oh my God, like I needed some therapy. And this worked. And having her friend call her out on it, which I felt that was kind of weak, because the friend was like, this isn't you. And I was like, this is totally her.
But how many times again have you seen her with Tendi doing that stuff? She's always with Boimler, and she's always doing, like, either she's with Boimler or she's doing it on her own. But I'll have to go. I'm not going to go back. I'll have to go back and watch. But I wouldn't be surprised if, like, they never really had any shittiness together like that. So I enjoyed that happening. And I actually, that's a good point. They went off on that freak ship when Mariner was having that problem with the captain. So, like, there were moments where they just weren't together. They just see each other off duty. So I could see that. And I liked that. And I think that was the crux for me when it was Tendi saying, like, this is too far and you are being xenophobic to me, saying that I'm just a pirate or a raider. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's a give and take. Yeah, she didn't have any of those adventures with her to know that. But Boromir's girlfriend has never met her, but knows she's a space badass. Like, so there's a very inconsistency in the writing of what the people in this world know and don't know. Having said that, I was really like, this is you had your character who is very flawed. If anybody is watching this at any time in the history of forever, Mariner is, in the first season, is a horribly flawed character, and sometimes they don't know what to do with her. It feels like sometimes she's very helpful, and sometimes she's horribly hindering. Sometimes she's the biggest badass, and sometimes she has fucked everything up to the point that other people have to save her, and then she makes it like she didn't need saving. So she's been a problem for me anyhow, as a viewer watching this constantly in the show. So to have her fight herself and her need to do that, this show needed this episode. And
I think that's where it was smart, where you didn't like that they used the crew's logs to, like, create these realistic characters. The fact that it was called out, where it was like, no, you would do this if there was a pirate doing this to the ship. You would be fighting that person. So it even tied back to that, like making it a smart use of why they did all these things.
And then the other thing I loved is, again, because I'm just a sucker for him, is everything with Rutherford, right down to his last line with the why don't you go talk to your boss? And he's like, nah, look at him over there. Such a badass. And just shows like a sad man sitting alone.
Sadly eating
soup. Eating soup, the saddest of meals. And that's just wonderful. Like again, I don't know what it is about Rutherford, but I think I could watch like 20 episodes of just the Adventures of Rutherford, and it would be. We didn't think we'd get the Warp Cores to do this, and we did. Like that would be the episode. It would be like the lamest. It would make the Andy Griffith Show look, edgy and sharp, because it was like there'd be no conflicts whatsoever with this guy.
And it's really not a character like type we've ever seen on the shows. The only thing I could think is like maybe like Rom in Deep Space Nine, where they kind of made that look like it was like mental challenges to him, but like how Rom was like always positive.
Yeah.
But you've never had someone who was just like loved the fact that he was in this Star Trek world. We've had people that live in it and accept it, but he loves that it's this place where anything can happen, that he has to work hard.
Yeah.
And I dig that. It's just someone who's so good.
Yeah.
I like you said, I really dig him.
Yeah, it's weird. Like, it's hard. He's a hard character to explain, because somebody asked me about explaining the 4 characters, and I was pretty mean about 2 of them, and then the other 2, one was a very nice, nonchalant audience point of view character, where she's new to the ship. We literally see her going to the ship for the first time in the first episode, so she's new, learning everybody like us. And I was like, and another person is kind of like a cyborg version of Geordi LaForge, if he was just really excited about everything, which Geordi was never. Geordi was very confident, and he was very precise in his action, but he was never like, oh boy,
Oh my God, you know what? I was you just saying that made me think like he's sort of like early season 1 Wesley, where he's like he knows everything and he digs everything.
And I hated Wesley, so it's really weird. This is really weird, but Rutherford, man, just I don't know what it is about everything that they've done with him. Yeah, like if they came out with, The Simpsons did an episode where it was just the Ned Flanders show.
Yeah.
At the end, where it was like, hey, get ready for church. We're not going to church today. What? Because it's Saturday. And that's the episode. That's the episode. And I feel like they could do that with Rutherford. Like, Rutherford is Ned Flanders if Ned Flanders was more interesting. I don't know. Because even Ned Flanders sounds like a
No, because it's that Ned Flanders. It's that other scene where Homer goes, Flanders, get over. He's like, Hidely ho, and someone says something, and Homer goes, damn it, never mind. He's like, toodly do, and just walks away happy. it's that character. It is just the unrelentless positivity, and I like I said, I really dig that.
Yeah. So in this episode, and it's like you said, using this going forward. In episode 6, we saw them all working together and overcoming issues, and we were really hoping, oh man, I think either they got notes or they're finding their footing, and there's nothing wrong with that. Again and again and again, we said this many times. Star Trek, even the best Star Trek, has a hard time finding where it's going before it gets there. Every show does, man. This last summer, I became a big fan of the TV show Community. The first 6 episodes are weird, and everybody calls the Halloween episode kind of the repilot. Because when the Halloween episode in season 1 happens, then we understand the characters, and then we see how it works. So it takes shows a while to find their footing sometimes. Venture Brothers Venture Brothers just got canceled. Everybody's like, this is outrageous. Venture Brother got canceled. I was like, not really. And I love Venture Brothers. I'm huge.
Let's be realistic here, buddies.
Venture Brothers was trying to do season 8. I am 42. I fell in love with Venture Brothers in my mid-20s when it first started. And kudos to 2 guys who do it that were like, nope, we want to keep it in-house. We're not going to hire a staff of 80 people. We want to do it. 2 guys, that's it. Cool. Then you need to deliver. And they were late on episodes every year. It took 2 to 3 years, and then it would get pushed back. Then they would release 1 episode, then it get pushed back. And I love the Venture Brothers, but I think Cartoon Network was sweet to them, sweeter than any place would have ever been, and more patient. And so when it got canceled, I was very much like, yeah, that seems fine. Yeah.
I have a counterpoint to what you're saying in terms of needing like episode 6 and getting notes and getting course correction. I'm wondering if they're taking an X-Files type of approach on this, where there are going to be Monster of the Week episodes, but then episodes like episode 6 and then episodes like this one that are more of the conspiracy episodes, or in this one we'll say the continuity episodes, where there are these episodes that are furthering the story, but then there are going to be those episodes that are just wacky and everybody will go back to their archetypes.
I'm okay with that within reason. You know, it is a tricky one, because one of the worst things about the Picard show is that it's actually one story spread over 13 episodes, and that story isn't strong enough to be a 3-parter. Like, that story, they're so padded, and the padding is so stupid. I wanted
to bring that up with you again, the Picard stuff. We talked about Picard and how much it ignored integral parts of Next Generation to tell its story. And it sort of feels like, why don't they throw some of the references that Lower Decks have over to Picard? Because you just have to mention LOL or lore even.
Yeah.
Like, that could have done wonders for Picard, where it's like, but there's also, he had another daughter. Yeah, and that turned out bad. But this one, he succeeded. Done. You mentioned it. You pleased fans like us, but you don't look like you're no longer in a vacuum versus the references that we have all throughout.
Definitely. Or even one of the big criticisms I heard from several Star Trek geeks was Picard is one long episode, and so's Discovery. Discovery is each season is season-long episode, and Star Trek
season 2 gets a little better.
And Star Trek used to be more about an individual sci-fi story, and we're going to tackle it with our characters, and our characters will change with the story, but it's an individual story. So all you need to know, and Next Generation and the original series is great with this. What do you need to know about Next Generation and the original series? It's in the opening credits.
Yep.
That's it. Like space, the final frontier. Where are the voyages? We do this. That's what we're about. You ready to watch? Cool. And then they go into
word for word.
Word for word. I've had it memorized. I say it before I go to sleep. That's exactly how I go to sleep too. So a lot of people were mad. I think there's a room for both. Like, I was actually excited with Discovery before Discovery came out. Originally was being developed, I think, by what's his name?
Brian Fuller.
Brian Fuller.
Doing it, yeah.
And he said at a comic book convention, I don't think San Diego, but a different one, he was planning, they were like, oh, who's the new crew? What's the crew we're going to be watching? And he said, I would like to do a different crew every year.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody, all of us kind of like stopped for a second, because that's an interesting idea of like, no, we know the Enterprise and we know Deep Space Nine and we know all these different, a Voyager, and we've stayed with them for 7 years. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. What if we just focused and said, give me, 13 to 24 episodes of this crew dealing with different conflicts the whole time? And I was like, that could work. That's an interesting enough idea. So,
yeah. And you haven't seen all of Discovery. How much have you seen?
Like 2 episodes, and I will watch it. It's been a weird week.
No. I'm not saying that. I'm saying in terms of where Discovery comes in, it's rough in that first season, because they do take that thing where it's going to be this one crew that deals with stuff. And there are Monster of the Week episodes, but they are all in service of the main plot that first season has. Second season even continues on with this overarching plot that has these episodes of the week, but then even those ones get tied in later. So it's kind of it's a bizarre show, and I'm hoping that the way that this season has been laid out, that it'll be a lot different, because I liked the promise of Discovery, where it was, we're going to follow a lieutenant, we're not going to follow a captain and the bridge crew. But then you could see where either CBS or the other producers decided we didn't like where Fuller was taking this. So you see the course correction happening throughout the first season, and then it just becomes another Star Trek show. So I think you're going to get some whiplash, but again, I'm interested to see where we're going with this next season. I'm interested to see what you think of the rest of that show once you get to it.
And Discovery, for me, it will be interesting. The couple episodes I watched, I think, are all from season 1, and I didn't really care for them. But for Star Trek friends I'm friends with that know Star Trek well are very divided. Some of them are like, Discovery is the best thing in a long time, and some of them are like, Discovery is really weak. And so, yeah, it'll be interesting to watch and kind of then really give an opinion on that.
Yeah, and I honestly, I'm looking forward to that. So I really can't wait for you catching up, because I think that there are 1 or 2 episodes of season 2 of Discovery that are some of my favorite episodes of Star Trek.
Oh, wow.
One in particular that down to the main opening credits, it's like, okay, this is what you guys are doing with this episode. I am all in.
All right.
So I'm interested to see your take on that episode specifically.
Yeah. There was just a lot I saw that I kept getting annoyed with too, so I never jumped in. I had CBS All Access a year ago, I think, to watch the Twilight Zone show, because I think Jordan Peele is amazing. Get Out and Us, and even his show on Comedy Central is some really smart writing. And then I watched the Twilight Zone episode, and I was like, this is trash.
It's very polarizing.
Good Lord. So that was sad. So for somebody who loves Star Trek so much, and there's still an all right episode in the new show altogether, but that's been the case with every Twilight Zone. There was the new Twilight Zone in the 80s, had a couple good episodes.
There's one in there. Did you ever see the one where it was a couple that got knocked out of the normal progression of time, and they were trapped in the moments between seconds, where there are these architects that are basically moving things from second to second? That it was time was such a microcosm that I'm not moving my arm. In between seconds, there are people posing me and making me do this and making me talk. And it was just a freaky concept. But that 80s Twilight Zone episode has stuck with me.
There's a couple 80s Twilight Zone episodes that are amazing, and some that are really fun, and there's smart ones, there's scary ones. I think I was rewatching one done by Joe Dante of Gremlins fame and everything else, called The Shadow Men that live under children's beds.
Oh shit. Are those on All Access, or is...
I don't know. I'd have to look for it's on. I can find it on YouTube and send it to you if it comes down to it. But
even like you said, the UPN one with Forrest Whitaker, like it's
had a couple good ones. Like and that was the thing. Every Star Trek show or every Twilight Zone the show that they've done, there's always 1 or 2 that's pretty good. The new show, I can't point to one yet. I can point to ones that are fine. But
there's a good creepy one with Jenna Elfman and Christopher Maloney in this second season of stuff. If you get around to it, I'm interested to see what you think, because for me, Stephanie and I were torn on what happens at the end of the episode. And not in terms of like, I think it was good, I think it was bad. It was like, that was interesting and spooky, but we are very torn on what happens at the end.
Okay. There's a second season of Twilight Zone?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, I didn't even know. The last one I watched was the one where the girl gets sucked into the Twilight Zone with Rod Serling, and I was just like,
I haven't seen it.
Oh, all right, sorry. I thought that was season 1.
I didn't watch it all. I was okay.
It sucks. That one sucks so bad. That one is such a dumb concept.
No.
Like, yeah, it's so some of the episodes are so bad.
I went to a Paley Fest panel for, it was Twilight Zone and Discovery together. It was a CBS All Access night, and oof, man, I was so disappointed. Yeah. They all talked a good game, but then it was like, let's describe the episodes, and it was like, that sounds like it could be a good Outer Limits or something, but I don't see the social implication or the inherent spookiness of that, and it just was weak, and that really turned me off of the rest of the show. So I was like, okay, whatever.
I'm a mook, and I saw Jordan Peele was doing Twilight Zone, and I was like, sold, and like, you know,
Same here.
One ticket, sir, for this, and you're getting Picard back too. Ah! Like I actually Facebook, if that's still a thing in 10 years, hopefully not.
You're just mad because you're banned right now.
I'm banned right now because I used the phrase white trash. And then my dispute was putting me in jail is a real white trash thing to do. Was my dispute. So they denied my dispute, and now I'm locked. So nice. My original comment was, well, the problem with this country is there's too much white trash. And I stand by that. Put it on the grave. So, yeah. I got really excited. There's an old post that I saw about why I'm excited about Picard. And I wrote like a page-long post about Star Trek for the last, 10, 11 years has all been in the past. We haven't had anything past Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. I watched Star Trek for the Future. When I hit like 35, I was like, I don't need to see another prequel ever again in my life. Ever. Because I know your ending. Your ending is where the other one begins, or you don't give a shit about the story, then why am I watching you if I was
Or what's interesting to me is the world that you're from, not the world that came before it.
Yeah. So what happens next is a natural obsession we all have. And Hollywood and television have been milking our natural obsessions with it forever. We all wonder what happens to Peter Pan at the end after the story. We all wonder about every character, what happens to them next. And that's why we have fan fiction. That's why we have sequels. That's why we have everything. And the truth is, what happens at the end doesn't matter. If it mattered, it would have been in the original story. Like, honestly, that's the honest truth. And that's something we hate. We don't want to hear that. We want to hear Frankenstein's monster still had more stories. We want to hear Dracula. Did he die? Maybe there was a little more that happened there. Huh?
Did I ever send to you Chip Zdarsky, the comic book writer? He posted a picture of the last page of Dracula, and it's the last line. And then in pen, he's written, and then the monster shouted, "It's okay if you refer to me as Frankenstein. I'm fine with it."
Yeah, that's yep. Yeah, and so it's very human. It's obviously very human for us to get attached to characters and want to know what's next. And Hollywood loves that. Hollywood and really media and content creators love that. So if we come up with characters that you like, you're going to just keep asking for it, and I can give you the same sandwich. We can McDonald's and Starbucks you forever. You will get that same mocha. You will get that same number 2, quarter pounder with cheese. So, but
did you watch Harry Potter and the Cursed Child when it was up there, or have you read it?
No, and I'm okay. And it was, I was not a big Harry Potter fan. Okay. I didn't read the books. I made fun of everybody that were my friends reading them because we were a little too old for it. And then I saw the first movie on DVD, and I was instant it was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. By end of it, I had a Harry Potter balloon and a wand, and I was like, let us goeth. So I was such a fan by the end of the movie, where I was like, if I was 10, this would have been unapologetically would have been my world. Like, what? I don't leave the house unless I'm in my cloak. I would have been a problem because there was way too much fun detail into that first one.
Yeah, and that's where the way the world worked in there, sucked people in the way that all good fantasy and sci-fi does. So good for them on that. The conceit of Cursed Child is that it takes place 20 years later after the last book, but then deals with time travel, and they go back into the events of Goblet of Fire. Yeah. And I was like, all right, whatever. But not to spoil it for you or anyone, who cares? It's old and you shouldn't be giving Rowling money. They go back and they mess up Harry's son and Malfoy's son go back and mess up a key moment in Goblet of Fire and are then trapped in the past. and the school has been taken over by the Death Eaters, and it is like, oh shit, the fascists won. And that's how the play ends, because it's a 2-part play. It's a 2.5 hour thing. So in the beginning, you go in, and this was the coolest stagecraft I've ever seen. You go in, the carpeting, the curtains everywhere in the theater are all Hogwarts stuff. The shift happens, the lights come back on in the theater, and everything has been replaced by Slytherin stuff and Voldemort's Dark Mark. And when you leave the theater, all the decorations in the theater are different. They don't have the same merchandise out. Now all the merchandise is all the evil merchandise.
Nice.
And it's like, oh, that's fucking cool. But I like the idea that it wasn't just a prequel going back and let's relive these glory days, because Harry is a piece of crap throughout this. I mean, he's a guy that grew up and became a cop, and he's not really the hero of this. It's all about his son and Draco's son. But I like the idea that they went back and they destroyed the timeline, and it's sort of very Star Trek Kelvin timeline-ish, where this thing happened, things drastically changed, and that's the kind of story I want. I want to see what happens to the next generation of people from these heroes, but I don't want to see that at the service of, like we've talked about, seeing Han Solo die and seeing Luke die and seeing Leia die. I was watching bits of Rise of Skywalker again last night because I hate myself, and it struck me more about how fucked up it is that Chewie is by himself at the end of that movie. Chewie and the droids. Like, everyone we love in that first trilogy is dead except for Lando. And Lando just got shoehorned into that thing.
Yeah, I honestly thought they were going to kill everybody in Last Jedi. I really thought, because it was such a pissing contest, that it was, you know what? I killed Han in the first one, and then he killed my Luke. So I'm just going to make sure nobody else gets to kill my characters. So I'm just going to butcher these motherfuckers. Because, like, when they blew up Chewbacca, I'm gullible. So as soon as they killed Chewbacca, I was like, oh shit, they killed Chewbacca. Like, I yelled it in the theater. No, not really, but I emotionally did. And then the trailer had C-3PO. I'm just saying goodbye to my friends one more time. And I was like, man, they're going to kill the fucking droids. You're all dead. You're all dead. So, like, that's going to be how he ends this, is he will just murder all of you.
It's messed up that ultimately what Picard became and what ultimately the sequel trilogy became for Star Wars is what I joked about when I first saw Force Awakens. It was like, this was great. It's 30 years later, and Han Solo is a deadbeat dad, then he dies, and R2-D2's in a coma. That's what I wanted to see this whole time.
And talking about going and doing prequel stuff, but us still wanting more, I actually thought the Bad Robot 2009 Star Trek was smart.
Yeah.
Where it was like, we've gone just before all this shit happened, and we are going to alter the timeline completely.
And we're going to acknowledge it and own to the fact that there was this thing that came before, but now we're a new spin on it. That was so smart of them.
Yeah. And they even there were people like, oh, they really buttered it on. I was like, I think they needed to. I'm okay with buttering it on when you're going, hey, this thing that has fandom for, 50 years, we are going to completely alter it. So we need to have a scene where all of them are on the bridge going, we're in an alternate timeline. You mean an ultimate timeline? How do you spell that? Is that ultimate timeline? Like, we need that scene, guys. We need a scene of them, milking it just and lathering it all over us, just so that we know that everybody's got it. Nobody left the movie going, wait, was that our timeline? Yeah. No one. Everybody left there going, like, I know exactly what you're trying to do. And now we can go forward and do whatever we want.
It was like an entire scene around that moment in First Contact that I always laugh at, where Data's like, the Borg sphere is creating a temporal anomaly. And some of those temporal anomaly, and Riker goes, time travel. And it's like, okay. So everyone in the back knows what's going on.
Yep. And that I think that's one of the reasons why so many of us hate Into Darkness, because, two things. One, it's just a horrible film. But two, you can do anything now. And the next thing you do is Khan. Yeah. And it's like, you, oh my God,
Hey, let me ask you a question. This will be for all the Star Trek nerds that are going this far into this. Do you take it in Star Trek 2 that when Khan says, full disclosure, I'm only asking this because I was listening to the Star Trek 2 score on the drive home today.
Ooh.
But when Khan is looking at the view screen and he says, with hell's heart, I spit my last breath at thee. Does he die at that moment?
Yeah, I mean,
I don't have an answer. I'm asking your interpretation.
With Khan, he's a genetically modified made human, so I don't think he can even die that easily. I think it took the Genesis device to blow him up. So no, I think he's still, me personally, if I'm looking at the science of the world they've established, he would still be alive at that point. But I think it very much is, I don't, the line obviously is, I do not give a shit about anything, you motherfucker.
So what made me think that is that the moment I see it is that Ricardo Montalban's face does like sort of like this, like loses its muscle tension as if he's like relaxed.
Yeah.
And so I can think that he died in there, but I would love it because I hate Khan as a villain so much. Love him and hate him as a villain so much. I love the idea that he sees the Enterprise warp away right before the Genesis device explodes. And I love the idea of him knowing he's defeated before the explosion.
Yeah.
And I can't reconcile if he does or not, but I think that's my idea, that he sees it go away and he's like, fuck. And he knows that he's defeated.
It's the joke we always talk about in Empire Strikes Back is the last shot, the second to last shot of Darth Vader in Empire Strikes Back is the most human thing he ever does, which is he's talking to Luke and Luke is on the Millennium Falcon. He's like, "You're my son. I'm your father. You must come to me. We'll do this." And then R2 fixes the ship and they take off into hyperspace and everybody gets quiet and Vader turns around to walk away and then turns back real quick just to see, like, did I see what I saw? Did I see what I saw? And it's so great to see, like, the ultimate badass space wizard. You can kill me and I'm still coming back. I'm missing legs and an arm and I'll fuck you up. Badass. Go like, did they really leave? Like he turns around a second time. It's so sweet because it's the most human thing he does in those three movies. So, yeah. All right. That was a wonderful tangent as always. Mike, Star Trek Lower Decks, Episode 9. I think, what is it called? Crisis Point?
Crisis Point.
Crisis Point. What would be your review of this episode?
I give this episode a 4 Darmoks out of 5 Jalads. This episode to me is Riker and John Locke in a conspiracy. Riker confused about loyalty. Riker betraying his old captain.
That's a good review, and I'm going to second that. I am going to give this 4 Darmoks out of 5 Jalads. And I gave this a little bit of thought earlier tonight. This is, for me, Star Trek 3, The Search for Spock. Half of this is horrible, but we need this to move on. So we need this episode to happen. We need for... this show is either going to be, if it carries on past the 10 episodes, this show is either going to be we're watching the world's shittiest person in Starfleet be the world's shittiest person, or we need to see her friends talk to her and try to work with her to make her into the person she can be, which is...
which we haven't mentioned, the big twist at the end of the episode. Boimler finds out that Mariner is Captain Freeman's daughter, and I didn't like that part. I think that was one of my dislikes, is that he botches his interview with the captain because he can't get it out of his head. And then the cherry on top that I hated was the captain being like, Boimler, unprepared, fail. And it's like, come on, like, don't kick him when he's down. But I'm interested to see where that goes. It needs to progress, and I hope that they stick the landing on this one.
Yep. If you go back and watch Star Trek 3, I'm hit or miss with it. Sometimes it doesn't hold up at all. Like I'll be watching it and I'm like, every scene of this is trash. And sometimes I'm watching it going, I really like watching the crew work alone without Starfleet, which sounds weird, but that's what the movie is more about.
Yeah.
Seeing them steal a starship, seeing them work with each other and just be kind of like, hey guys, we have to do this thing and I don't know if it's going to work out.
I love it from them breaking Bones out of prison to them getting to Vulcan. At that point, it's like, I don't like that last 15 minutes.
Yep.
I like the very last scene I like, but it's like this weird mysticism part of the Vulcan part. And then everything about them getting back to space dock I don't like, but then that middle chunk I really enjoy.
Yeah, and so that's what this episode was for me. It was Star Trek Episode 3, where it was like, we get to have Undiscovered Country and A Voyage Home because Star Trek 3 happened.
Yeah.
You know, Voyage Home, we wouldn't have a lot of the humor of Spock is dealing with being kind of a newborn, you know, which is a lot of fun in that film without him being reborn. And then in 6, without Spock, we wouldn't have, you know, the bulk of, you know, Undiscovered Country making it.
I dig 6 so much, man. 6 is, and so I really dug the signatures on the screen of the character name at the end of this. But 6, I feel, has a very bad reputation, but I really dig it. The only thing to me that would make 6 better is if they had managed to stick the landing on casting Kirstie Alley as Saavik instead of having to be Valeris. Mm-hmm. That would have made the entire series tie back up with those major 3 movies. Even if you got Robin Curtis to be Saavik, if Saavik was the one on the ship, would have been cool, because you see her be taught by both Kirk and Spock in 2, 3, and 4 about how it's like, I'm so strict trying to do this Vulcan stuff, but I'm learning that you can bend the rules from Spock. I'm learning how to obfuscate the rules from Kirk. And then to get that betrayal in 6 feels like that would have been really strong and not just some random new lieutenant.
Anybody that you're friends with that bashes 6, send them to me. I'll yell at them for an hour, because I actually think the movie is progressive before being progressive was even a main thing in the thought or of society about like how we be accepting. The movie is about
line at dinner.
It's not just that line at dinner, but it's true all the way through it. Mm-hmm. And it is about our some people's inherent racism and how do we get over that. And the movie, just like all good science fiction, is talking about a social issue that we're dealing with. We are dealing with Russia falling apart at the time. And should America, who has been fighting with Russia for the Soviet Union for so long, should it help? And Spock's line of, Jim, they're dying, and Jim's response, let them die. Let them die. We all heard people saying those lines about what to do about.
We still hear that today.
Yeah. So, and sometimes we're more Kirk than we're Spock, so, and then we get put in Facebook jail, so, which is okay. So I really, that movie is incredibly important. And yeah, the fact that it would even call out its own show about its shit. You were saying the line at the dinner, and we believe everybody has basic human rights, even your phrases are racist.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that is. Like, and it was, even as a kid watching that, I was like, oh my God. And as an adult, that you built a show that turned into a movie series, that turned into a franchise, that turned into something that everybody loves. And you're going to call yourself out on your own shit in your final movie? It's just good. It's such good Star Trek. 6 is amazing. So anybody who doesn't like it, kick rocks. Like, that is such a great film. Yes, there's too much time in the prison planet, and yes, they really, William Shatner obviously pushed for.
We're gonna go another 2 hours on
Yeah, I
this.
know. William Shatner was like, "Well, who do I punch in the face in this movie?" And it's like, nobody. And he's like, "Well, I'm not doing it." So like, better get him a scene where he punches people
All
in
right,
the face.
dude, you fight yourself. Oh, even better.
Yeah. So Oscar time. All right. So we'll do that. We'll review the
Oscar time. Can you imagine what year was that? That was 91. Yeah, it was 91. So I was gonna say like
I think Shawshank Redemption's 92, right? That'd be so great.
93 or so, but it's just like I was thinking because we did a trivia night last night and we were doing like 90 the year Silence of the Lambs one, but just imagine like and best actor nominees Anthony Hopkins, Jeremy Irons, and William Shatner for Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country.
Even on the title, it had a question mark, on like the image that would come up. William Shatner? So, yeah.
Oh, my God.
No, Six is amazing. Six is amazing. It's an espionage story, which we have all these space starship fractions, and we've never had any spies. We've never had any espionage. And it's like, of course we've never seen any of those stories. Here's one of those stories. It's about racism. It's about how we overcome our own personal racism. And we do it through Kirk and Spock and Bones. And I thought, like, man, that's just smart. And making Kirk realize, like, yeah, I'm racist. I'm racist. I am the wrong person for this mission. And Spock is saying, no, it has to be you because you are racist.
Yeah.
Like that, only Nixon could go to China. Like, we got to send our shithead so that even everybody will know, even our shithead is okay with this.
There are two jokes that are like powerful at the end where Spock is sad. They've rescued Kirk and McCoy and he goes, I messed this up. You and Dr. McCoy could have been killed. And Kirk goes, the night's young. I like that. But then when he says, Spock tells him, he's like, he goes, I screwed this up too, Spock. And he goes, but I screwed this up too. And Spock goes, so does that mean that you and I have outlived our usefulness? And they're just like, let's get back to the bridge. And I really dig that.
It's such a good film. Such a good film. I'd fight anybody on that.
If I didn't have homework to do, I would probably watch it. I'm so torn right now. I have homework to do. I was supposed to go to the drive-in tomorrow to see the opening night of Beyond Fest in Los Angeles. They ended up doing a drive-ins this year. But then I also just downloaded the new Star Wars VR Squadrons X-Wing game.
Oh, yeah.
And I cannot wait to like be in a VR X-Wing cockpit. I'm like, I got to record. I got homework. I want to watch Star Trek 6. So this is a bad time.
All right. That means it's time to end this. Guys, thank you so much for watching Damage Reports. You can find more of us on YouTube or on the website packadayproductions.com. We're also been talking about maybe having a Facebook page sometime soon where we won't be in jail. And
I'll go ahead and moderate that page.
Yeah, it will not be moderated by somebody that calls everybody a bunch of poor white trash. And then
coming soon for Star Trek Discovery, we will have a full-fledged launch of Damage Reports, and I can't wait for that. So stick around, and the best is yet to come.
All right. Thanks for so much, guys. Mike, always a pleasure talking to you.
James, it's a highlight of my week. Thank you, sir.
All right. Have a good night, everybody.